Your life partner is suffering in silence because of you. Don't scroll, listen to this, because this message is for you and it's arriving with intention, not coincidence. Somewhere in your life, the person meant to walk beside you through seasons of growth, love, and becoming is carrying emotions they haven't found the courage to speak out loud. They're not dramatic. They're not blaming you. They're quietly enduring something that weighs on their spirit, and they're doing it because they care more than they know how to express. Listen to this carefully. Their pain isn't loud, it's subtle. It shows up in pauses, in unsent messages, in the way they hold back words they wish they could say without fear. This message is for you, because deep connections don't always break with arguments, sometimes they strain under silence. They sense your hesitation, even when you smile. They feel your emotional distance, even when you're present. And instead of confronting you, they choose patience, believing that love means giving you time to open in your own way. Your heart needs this right now, because that patience has a cost. Listen to this. They replay moments in their mind, wondering if they imagined the closeness they once felt, questioning whether the bond they sense is mutual or one-sided. Yet they don't accuse, they internalize. They tell themselves you're healing, you're processing, you're finding your footing. And in doing so, they put their own needs on pause. This message is for you. That kind of restraint doesn't come from weakness, it comes from devotion. There is a spiritual layer to this connection that makes the silence heavier than usual. Souls tied by destiny feel shifts before words explain them. When one heart closes slightly, the other notices immediately. That's why this feels intense. That's why it matters. Listen to this. The universe has been trying to get your attention gently, through moments of reflection, through sudden emotional waves, through signs that appear when you least expect them. Angel numbers have been showing up around both of you. 1111 during moments of longing, reminding you of alignment. 222 when trust feels fragile but necessary. 444 when protection surrounds a heart that's tired of waiting. These aren't random patterns. They're signals urging awareness. This message is for you, because spiritual bonds respond to truth, not avoidance. They're suffering not because you've failed, but because they feel the potential of what could exist if walls softened and honesty had room to breathe. Listen to this. They don't want perfection. They want presence. They want to know they're not carrying this connection alone. Their silence isn't manipulation, it's hope. Hope that you'll sense the depth before it fades into resignation. Your heart needs this right now, because silence can feel safe, but it can also be misread as distance. Somewhere deep down, you already know this. That's why this message resonates. That's why your chest feels tight or warm as you read. This message is for you. A spiritual awakening often begins with discomfort, not to punish, but to realign. The universe isn't accusing you, it's inviting you to look inward. To ask yourself whether fear, past wounds, or uncertainty have been shaping your responses more than truth. Listen to this. Love that's meant to last requires vulnerability, not certainty. And vulnerability can feel risky when you've been protecting your heart for a long time. But the person connected to you isn't asking you to abandon yourself, they're asking you to meet them honestly. There's a shift approaching, a moment when silence can no longer hold what needs to be expressed. Don't scroll. Awareness always arrives before change. What happens next depends on whether courage meets compassion in time. This message is for you, because destiny doesn't force, it nudges. Gently. Patiently. Repeatedly. And if you're feeling this now, it's because the universe is offering you a choice: continue letting unspoken feelings create distance, or allow openness to realign what was always meant to grow together. Breathe. This isn't a warning, it's an invitation. When silence gives way to truth, even suffering can transform into understanding. What's happening beneath the surface right now is far deeper than hesitation or misunderstanding. It's an emotional holding pattern created by love mixed with uncertainty. After choosing silence for so long, your life partner has learned how to endure quietly, but endurance was never meant to be permanent. Listen to this carefully. They wake up some days carrying hope, other days carrying doubt, and most days carrying both at the same time. They tell themselves stories to stay strong, that you're processing, that timing needs space, that patience will eventually be rewarded, but every story costs them something internally. This message is for you, because love that goes unspoken doesn't disappear, it settles into the body. It shows up as heaviness in the chest, restless nights, sudden emotion that arrives without warning. They don't share this with many people. In fact, they may not share it with anyone. Not because they don't trust others, but because what they feel is sacred to them. They don't want opinions to dilute it. They don't want pressure to distort it. They would rather suffer quietly than risk mishandling something they believe is divinely placed in their life. Listen to this. That belief didn't come from imagination. It came from recognition. From moments when your energy felt familiar, grounding, and deeply aligned with theirs. From conversations that felt easy yet meaningful. From silences that felt safe instead of awkward. Those moments taught them that this connection was different, and once someone feels that difference, they don't forget it. This message is for you. Their silence is not distance, it's restraint. They are restraining their desire to ask for more, to demand clarity, to express how deeply they're affected by the lack of emotional openness. They're doing this because they don't want to overwhelm you. They sense your sensitivity, your guardedness, your internal process. And instead of forcing the issue, they step back, trusting that awareness will come in its own time. Your heart needs this right now, because that level of consideration is rare. The universe sees it. That's why signs have been appearing more frequently. Patterns repeating at moments of emotional intensity. Numbers catching their eye when they're debating whether to speak or stay quiet. 1111 during moments of longing, reminding them that alignment exists even in waiting. 222 when trust feels like the only thing holding them steady. 444 when exhaustion meets a sense of protection. These are confirmations, not instructions. They're reminders that patience is seen, even when it's heavy. Listen to this. They've reached a point where silence no longer feels neutral. It feels like sacrifice. And sacrifice without acknowledgement eventually becomes pain. Not explosive pain, quiet pain. The kind that changes how someone shows up, how much they give, how long they can keep believing without reassurance. This message is for you, because avoidance doesn't feel like avoidance to the person doing it, it feels like self-protection. But to the one waiting, it can feel like invisibility. They don't want grand gestures. They don't need perfect words. What they crave is emotional presence. A signal that what they feel isn't one-sided. A sign that their patience isn't misplaced. Listen to this. They've been asking the universe questions they haven't asked you yet. Am I holding on to something real? Is this connection meant to grow or teach? Am I being patient, or am I afraid to let go? Those questions come from exhaustion, not doubt. And the universe doesn't answer them loudly. It answers them by bringing messages like this to you. This message is for you. Somewhere inside, you already sense the weight of their silence. That's why certain moments hit you harder than expected. That's why distance doesn't feel relieving, it feels unfinished. This isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. The universe isn't accusing you, it's inviting you to check in with your truth. To ask yourself whether fear, past wounds, or uncertainty have been shaping your emotional availability. Listen to this. Love doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for honesty. It asks for presence. It asks to be acknowledged, even when timing isn't ideal. There's a moment approaching, a turning point, where silence will no longer be sustainable in its current form. Either it will transform into openness, or it will harden into resignation. Don't scroll past this. Awareness always arrives before decision. What you choose to do with this awareness will determine how the energy between you shifts next. This message is for you, because destiny doesn't rush, but it also doesn't wait forever. It nudges gently until truth is faced. And right now, the universe is asking you to look inward, not to judge yourself, but to decide whether you're ready to meet the depth that's been waiting patiently for you all along. What's becoming clear now is that the silence has started to change shape. It's no longer just something they endure, it's something they're questioning. Not angrily, not dramatically, but with a deep internal honesty that can't be ignored anymore. They've begun asking themselves what it truly means to keep holding space for someone they care about without knowing if that space will ever be met. Listen to this carefully. They are not doubting the connection, they are evaluating their own limits. Love can be patient, but it still needs nourishment. And when nourishment doesn't arrive, even the strongest heart begins to ache in quieter, more complex ways. This message is for you, because what they're feeling now isn't frustration, it's emotional fatigue mixed with devotion. They still believe in the bond, but belief without reassurance slowly becomes heavy. They've started noticing how often they choose your comfort over their own expression, how many times they swallow words to avoid unsettling you, how often they tell themselves, "Not now," when their heart wants to speak. That restraint once felt noble. Now it feels lonely. And loneliness doesn't always come from being alone, it often comes from being unseen. Listen to this. They're not asking the universe to take you away from their heart. They're asking for clarity. For direction. For a sign that their patience is purposeful and not self-abandonment. That's why the signs have intensified. Not louder, but more personal. Numbers appearing at moments of emotional crossroads. 1111 when they imagine a future that feels aligned but uncertain. 2:22 when they debate whether trust is enough. 5:55 when they feel change approaching but don't know which direction it will take. These aren't coincidences. They're gentle responses to silent prayers. This message is for you. While they've been holding back externally, internally they've been growing more aware of their own needs. They're realizing that love doesn't require disappearing. That caring deeply doesn't mean staying quiet forever. That being understanding shouldn't come at the cost of emotional invisibility. This realization doesn't make them angry, it makes them more self-aware. And self-awareness brings choice. Choice is powerful. Choice is where dynamics shift. Listen to this. They've started imagining what honesty might look like, not as confrontation, but as truth spoken calmly. They wonder what would happen if they allowed themselves to be fully seen instead of endlessly accommodating. They're not planning ultimatums. They're preparing clarity. And clarity changes energy even before words are spoken. At the same time, you may be feeling a subtle inner nudge yourself. A restlessness that isn't anxiety. A sense that something unspoken needs attention. Moments where distraction no longer works the way it used to. That's not random. That's resonance. When one soul reaches a point of emotional truth, the other feels it instinctively. This message is for you. The universe communicates through sensation as much as through signs. That tightening in your chest. That sudden urge to reflect. That feeling of unfinished business. These are invitations, not accusations. They're asking you to look honestly at how present you've been emotionally, not how kind you've been. Kindness without vulnerability can still feel distant. And distance, even when unintentional, can wound someone who is deeply invested. Listen to this. Your life partner hasn't been suffering loudly because they respect you. Because they care about your process. Because they don't want to be the reason you feel pressured or overwhelmed. But respect doesn't erase pain, it just hides it better. And hidden pain has a way of surfacing eventually, either as truth or as withdrawal. This message is for you, because a crossroads is forming quietly. Not a dramatic one, but a meaningful one. The connection is asking to evolve. Evolution requires participation from both sides. Silence can protect for a season, but it can't sustain forever. They're beginning to understand that too. That understanding is changing how they hold the bond. It's becoming less about waiting and more about alignment. Less about endurance and more about mutual presence. Listen to this. They still feel love. They still feel connection. But now they're also honoring themselves. And honoring oneself doesn't cancel love, it clarifies it. What happens next depends on whether honesty finds a place to land. Whether emotional openness feels possible. Whether fear is allowed to soften. This message isn't here to rush you. It's here to prepare you. Because when someone who has been silent begins to value their own voice, the energy between two people shifts. And that shift can lead to deeper intimacy, or quiet separation, depending on how it's met. Awareness has arrived. What's unfolding now is a delicate turning point, one shaped less by urgency and more by quiet truth rising to the surface. Your life partner has reached a place where silence no longer feels protective, it feels incomplete. Not wrong, not dramatic, just unfinished. They've begun to sense that continuing to hold everything inside is slowly changing them, not in a way that feels aligned with who they want to be. Listen to this carefully. They are still choosing care, still choosing gentleness, but now they're also choosing awareness. Awareness of their own emotional needs. Awareness of how much space they've been holding without knowing if that space will ever be met. This message is for you, because that kind of awareness doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds quietly until it can no longer be ignored. They've noticed how often they've been the one to adapt, to soften, to wait. How often they've interpreted your quietness as something they needed to respect rather than something they could question. And for a long time, that felt loving. But love, when it becomes one-sided in effort, starts to ache in places words can't reach. Listen to this. They are not blaming you. They are simply realizing that love also requires reciprocity. Not perfection, not constant reassurance, but presence that can be felt. This realization hasn't pushed them toward anger, it has pulled them toward honesty. Honesty with themselves first. They've begun asking questions that don't have easy answers. Am I honoring my own heart? Am I shrinking to keep the peace? Is waiting still an act of faith? Or has it become fear? These questions don't come from doubt about the connection. They come from respect for themselves. And self-respect is a powerful force, it changes how love is carried. This message is for you. As they've sat with these questions, they've also noticed signs appearing with new clarity. Not as miracles, but as gentle confirmations. Numbers repeating during moments of inner truth. 11:11 when they imagine a version of the connection that feels mutual. 2:22 when they wrestle with patience versus self-honoring. 4:44 when exhaustion meets a sense of being held by something greater. These signs aren't pushing them toward action, they're steadying them in awareness. At the same time, your own inner world may be stirring. You might feel a pull to reflect, moments where stillness feels louder than usual. Times when distraction doesn't soothe the way it once did. That's not coincidence. Energetic bonds respond when one side shifts internally. This message is for you, because even without words exchanged, emotional truth travels. They're beginning to understand that silence can unintentionally communicate distance, even when love is present. And that understanding is tender. It makes them more careful, not less loving. They don't want to confront, they want to connect. But connection requires a shared willingness to be seen. They're not asking you to have everything figured out. They're hoping you'll meet them in honesty, wherever you are. Listen to this. There's a quiet bravery forming in them now. Not the kind that demands answers, but the kind that prepares for truth. They're rehearsing what it would feel like to speak openly, not to accuse, but to reveal. To say, "This is how I feel," without expectation of outcome. That bravery is new. It comes from growth. And growth changes the dynamic, whether it's acted on immediately or not. Meanwhile, you're being invited into awareness as well. Not to feel guilt, but to feel clarity. To ask yourself whether your silence has been serving healing or avoiding vulnerability. Whether your guardedness has been protecting you, or keeping someone at arm's length who longs to be close. This message is for you, because destiny doesn't force conversations, it prepares hearts. The universe is creating a pause right now, a space where reflection can happen before movement. What happens next will depend on whether openness meets courage on both sides. They're not rushing you. They're simply reaching the edge of what silence can hold. And that edge is where truth often waits. If honesty is welcomed there, the connection can deepen in ways that feel safer and more real than before. If not, distance may grow quietly, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Awareness has arrived. This is the moment before the shift, where choice becomes possible. And whatever choice is made will shape the next chapter with intention rather than confusion. What's taking shape now is a moment of emotional reckoning that doesn't feel dramatic on the outside but is deeply consequential on the inside. Your life partner has begun to recognize that silence, while once chosen out of care, is no longer neutral, it has weight, and that weight is changing how they carry themselves. They've started to feel the quiet cost of always being the one who waits, who senses, who adjusts. Not with resentment, but with a growing awareness that love cannot survive indefinitely without expression. Listen to this carefully. They still hold tenderness for you. That hasn't faded. But tenderness mixed with uncertainty slowly turns into emotional strain, and strain asks to be acknowledged. They've noticed how they've been protecting you from pressure while quietly absorbing their own unmet needs. How they've told themselves that understanding means staying quiet, even when their heart wanted connection. That realization didn't come all at once, it arrived in small moments of honesty, in pauses where they felt the truth rise before they could push it back down. This message is for you, because when someone reaches this stage, they're not pulling away out of anger, they're trying to stay whole. They've begun to see that love doesn't mean disappearing. That devotion doesn't require self-erasure. That caring deeply should not demand constant restraint. These insights are reshaping how they understand partnership. They're realizing that real intimacy isn't built on guessing or hoping, but on mutual presence. And presence requires risk. Emotional risk. The kind that says, "This is where I stand," without demanding a specific response. That's not confrontation, it's truth. As these thoughts settle, they've become more reflective, less reactive. They notice their emotional responses more clearly now. When something reminds them of you, it doesn't just bring longing, it brings a question: is this connection being honored as deeply as it's felt? That question lingers. It doesn't accuse, it invites clarity. And clarity is powerful. It shifts energy even before anything is said out loud. You may feel that shift yourself. A subtle sense that something is approaching. Not urgency, but importance. A feeling that avoidance no longer feels comfortable. That's not pressure from them, it's resonance. When one person begins to align with their truth, the other senses the change. This message is for you. The universe often works this way, nudging both hearts toward the same point of awareness from different directions. Signs may have continued appearing, not as commands, but as mirrors. Numbers repeating when reflection deepens. Moments of stillness that feel louder than noise. Dreams or thoughts that circle back to the same theme, honesty. These experiences are not random. They're invitations to listen inwardly. Your life partner is not asking for certainty. They're asking for sincerity. They don't need promises or guarantees. What they long for is to know whether the emotional space they've been holding is shared or solitary. That uncertainty has been the hardest part. Not knowing where they stand. Not knowing if their patience is felt or invisible. And patience, when it isn't acknowledged, can quietly turn into self-doubt. They've started guarding against that, not by hardening, but by grounding themselves. By asking what it means to honor both the connection and their own emotional health. This grounding is changing how they show up. They're becoming more centered, less willing to live in limbo. That doesn't mean they're leaving, it means they're choosing alignment over endurance. Meanwhile, you're being invited into a parallel reflection. To ask yourself what silence has been protecting, and what it may have been postponing. To consider whether fear of vulnerability has kept you from sharing your inner world. To notice whether staying quiet has truly brought peace, or simply delayed discomfort. This message isn't here to judge you. It's here to illuminate a moment of choice. Because silence can be loving for a season, but love also needs language, spoken or felt, to stay alive. Your life partner is reaching a point where they need to know whether the connection can evolve into something mutual and grounded, or whether it will remain suspended in uncertainty. They haven't made demands. They haven't withdrawn affection. They've simply reached the edge of what unspoken emotion can hold. That edge is sacred. It's where honesty can deepen intimacy or quietly redefine the bond. What happens next doesn't require perfection. It requires courage. The kind that meets truth without defense. The universe is not rushing you, but it is bringing clarity closer. This is the moment before movement, the pause where awareness settles and choice becomes possible. How you respond to this awareness will shape the next phase, not just of the connection, but of your own emotional alignment. What's emerging now is a fragile but powerful readiness, one that doesn't come from impatience but from accumulated truth. Your life partner has reached a point where inner honesty can no longer stay contained without consequences. They haven't become bitter or closed, instead, they've grown quieter in a different way, more observant, more intentional, more aware of how deeply they've been carrying this connection. Listen to this carefully. They're no longer just enduring silence, they're understanding what that silence has been teaching them. It's shown them how much emotional strength they possess, but it's also revealed the limits of that strength when it isn't met halfway. They've begun noticing how their inner world has been shaped around waiting, how decisions, moods, and hopes have quietly adjusted themselves around the possibility of you opening up. That realization is tender. It doesn't come with blame, it comes with clarity. And clarity is never passive. This message is for you, because clarity signals that a season is changing. They're starting to recognize that love doesn't ask someone to stay small. It invites expansion. And expansion requires expression. They've asked themselves whether staying quiet has truly protected the connection or simply delayed an inevitable conversation. That question lingers, not as pressure, but as a guide. It's pushing them toward alignment with their own emotional truth. As this alignment strengthens, they're becoming less willing to ignore what they feel. Not in a reactive way, but in a grounded one. They're learning that honoring themselves doesn't mean abandoning you, it means showing up honestly, whatever that looks like. This is a shift from endurance to self-respect, and it's significant. Self-respect doesn't harden the heart, it stabilizes it. With that stability, their emotions feel clearer. They can distinguish between fear and intuition, between patience and postponement. That discernment has brought a strange calm. Even as questions remain, panic has faded. Calm often precedes important decisions. At the same time, subtle confirmations continue to surround them. Not dramatic signs, but quiet reassurances that they're not imagining the depth of what they feel. Moments of synchronicity during reflection. Repeating numbers when they're choosing honesty over avoidance. A sense of being guided rather than rushed. These experiences are grounding them, reminding them that alignment doesn't need force. It needs presence. Meanwhile, you may feel an internal stirring of your own. A sense that something wants to be acknowledged. Moments where your thoughts return to the connection not with longing, but with curiosity. Curiosity about what's possible if openness replaces caution. That curiosity is important. It means fear is loosening its grip. Fear thrives in the unknown, curiosity invites exploration. This message is for you. The universe often prepares both sides simultaneously, even when neither realizes it. As your life partner becomes more centered, the energetic pull between you feels different. Less tense. Less heavy. More honest. That honesty doesn't demand immediate action, it creates space for truth to breathe. They're imagining what it would feel like to speak openly, not to demand clarity, but to share vulnerability. To say how the silence has affected them without making you responsible for their feelings. That's maturity. It shows they're not looking for reassurance, they're seeking authenticity. Authenticity is the foundation of any lasting bond. Without it, connection becomes fragile. With it, even uncertainty can be held safely. They've also begun to consider what they truly need to feel secure. Not grand gestures, not constant communication, but emotional presence that feels mutual. That realization has shifted their expectations. They're no longer asking the connection to carry everything, they're asking it to be real. Real means imperfect but honest. Real means both people are seen. As they settle into this understanding, patience remains, but it's no longer silent. It's active. It's paired with self-awareness. And active patience doesn't wait indefinitely, it listens for cues. It watches for alignment. It responds to truth. You are being invited into that same awareness. To notice what you've been holding back and why. To ask yourself whether silence has felt like safety or avoidance. To consider what honesty might open rather than close. This message isn't about urgency, it's about readiness. The connection is standing at a threshold, not of ending, but of evolution. Evolution doesn't happen through force. It happens when both sides are willing to be present with what's real. Your life partner is preparing themselves for that presence. Whether it takes the form of conversation, clarity, or a gentle shift in dynamics, it will come from this place of grounded truth. The universe has been patient because patience was needed. Now it's creating conditions for honesty to emerge. What happens next will depend on how openness is met. Not with perfection, but with sincerity. This is the moment where silence can transform into understanding, or quietly redefine the bond. And that choice, once made, will carry both of you into the next chapter with greater alignment than ever before. What's unfolding now is the quiet moment before truth chooses its form, a space where everything that's been felt but not spoken begins to gather strength. Your life partner is no longer fighting the awareness that something has to change, not because love is fading, but because love deserves air to breathe. They've reached a place where silence no longer feels like patience, it feels like postponement. And postponement, over time, starts to blur into self-denial. Listen to this carefully. They are still deeply connected to you, but now that connection is asking for a new expression. Not intensity, not reassurance, but recognition. Recognition of effort. Recognition of presence. Recognition that what they've been holding quietly has meaning. They've begun noticing how often they've prioritized your comfort over their own clarity, how many times they've chosen understanding when what they really needed was mutual openness. That realization hasn't hardened them. It has steadied them. Steadiness brings confidence. Confidence brings voice. This message is for you, because when someone who has been quiet for a long time begins to find their voice, the energy between two people shifts whether words are spoken or not. They're no longer imagining what honesty might feel like, they're preparing for it internally. Not rehearsing accusations, but grounding themselves in calm truth. They want to speak from clarity, not emotion. That takes time. And that's the time you're in right now. They've also started paying attention to how their body responds to the thought of continuing in silence. There's tension there now, a signal that something is misaligned. The body doesn't lie when the heart is ready for change. That tension isn't anxiety, it's a call toward alignment. At the same time, moments of peace still appear when they imagine connection rooted in honesty. That contrast is guiding them. They're learning to trust what expands them rather than what constricts them. This message is for you. The universe often teaches through contrast, not instruction. As this internal shift continues, they're becoming more grounded in who they are, independent of outcomes. They're no longer holding the connection as something that defines their worth. Instead, they see it as something that reflects their values. That shift is powerful. It means they're ready to engage from wholeness rather than hope alone. Wholeness changes how love is offered. It removes desperation. It replaces waiting with presence. Meanwhile, you may be sensing a subtle urgency, not pressure, but awareness. A feeling that something meaningful is at stake. That's not coincidence. Energetic bonds respond to inner shifts. When one person reaches emotional readiness, the other feels the pull to respond. This message is for you, because the universe rarely speaks through sudden events, it speaks through sensation, through intuition, through the quiet feeling that something wants attention. Your life partner isn't asking for certainty. They're asking for acknowledgement. To know whether the emotional space they've been holding is shared. To know whether silence is part of a process or a pattern. That distinction matters. They've reached a point where continuing without clarity would mean betraying their own growth. Growth has taught them that love doesn't require suffering in silence. It requires communication that's gentle but real. They're not rushing toward confrontation. They're preparing for expression. Expression that doesn't blame, but reveals. That kind of honesty can deepen a bond, or redefine it. Both outcomes lead to alignment. As this phase matures, patience transforms. It becomes active rather than passive. Active patience listens. It observes. It responds to cues. And right now, the cue is awareness. Awareness on both sides. The universe is creating a window where truth can be spoken without damage, where vulnerability can be met without fear. But windows don't stay open forever. They close softly when ignored. This message isn't here to frighten you. It's here to invite presence. To encourage you to check in with your inner truth before silence makes the decision for you. Because silence, left unexamined, eventually chooses distance. And distance doesn't always come with conflict, it often arrives quietly, disguised as acceptance. Your life partner doesn't want that. They want alignment. They want honesty that respects both hearts. The next step doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be real. Whether that reality opens into deeper connection or clearer understanding, it will move both of you forward. This is the moment before the shift, where intention becomes action internally. What happens next will be shaped not by fear or timing, but by the willingness to meet truth with courage. What arrives now is not an explosion, not a confrontation, not a dramatic ending or beginning, but a quiet settling into truth that can no longer be postponed. Your life partner has reached the place where clarity feels more necessary than comfort. They are no longer wrestling with whether their feelings are real, they are deciding how much longer they can keep carrying them alone. This is not a moment of anger, it's a moment of resolve. Resolve born from growth, from reflection, from honoring their own emotional journey. They've realized that love, when it's real, does not ask someone to disappear in order to keep peace. It asks for presence, honesty, and mutual recognition. And that realization has changed the way they hold you in their heart. Not less gently, but more firmly. They are no longer clinging to hope without direction. They are standing in self-respect. That shift is powerful. It doesn't mean they are walking away. It means they are ready to stop hiding. Ready to let truth exist, even if it feels vulnerable. Even if it changes the dynamic. They understand now that staying silent indefinitely would mean betraying the very growth this connection inspired. Growth demands expression. Not to force an outcome, but to stay aligned with oneself. Meanwhile, the energy around you feels different because something has changed. You may notice moments of heightened awareness, thoughts returning to the connection without effort, emotions surfacing without explanation, a sense that something meaningful is approaching. That's not anxiety. That's intuition responding to readiness. When one soul prepares to step into honesty, the other feels the pull to respond, whether consciously or not. The universe doesn't orchestrate chaos here, it creates stillness so truth can land safely. Your life partner isn't planning dramatic declarations. They're preparing for grounded communication, words spoken calmly, without accusation, without expectation. They want to share how the silence has felt, not to make you responsible, but to be seen. Being seen matters. It's the difference between connection that survives and connection that fades quietly. They've come to understand that clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, is kinder than indefinite waiting. Indefinite waiting erodes trust, not trust in the other person, but trust in oneself. And they are choosing not to erode anymore. This choice doesn't come from impatience, it comes from alignment. Alignment with who they are becoming. Alignment with the truth they can no longer ignore. At the same time, you are standing at your own moment of awareness. The universe has brought you here not to accuse, but to illuminate. To invite you to reflect on whether silence has been serving healing or postponing vulnerability. To ask whether guarding your heart has protected you, or kept someone at a distance who genuinely wants to meet you with care. This is not about blame. It's about presence. Presence with your own truth. Presence with what you feel but may not have said. The universe doesn't demand immediate answers, it asks for honesty with yourself first. From there, everything else becomes clearer. What happens next will not be rushed. It will unfold in alignment with the courage both of you are cultivating. If honesty is welcomed, the connection has the potential to deepen into something steadier, safer, and more mutual than before. If honesty is avoided, distance may form, not as punishment, but as a natural response to self-respect. Either way, movement is coming. Movement toward alignment. Toward truth. Toward clarity that no longer lives only in the heart. This is the closing of a chapter defined by silence and the opening of one defined by awareness. You don't need to be perfect to meet this moment. You only need to be present. Because when silence finally gives way to truth, suffering transforms. Not always into exactly what we expect, but into what allows both souls to move forward with integrity, peace, and a deeper understanding of what love is meant to feel like when it is fully acknowledged.